The alarm lights flashed red across the control room of the Veltar monitoring station. Krikstal's 4 eyes widened as he stared at his sensor display. Something massive had just appeared on his screen. Something that should not be there. The reading showed a human ship. Not just any human ship, but one of their biggest war vessels. A Dreadnought. The computer said it was less than 50 kilometers away from their station. That was impossible. Nothing could get that close without being seen. Krikstal's long fingers moved quickly over his controls. He checked the sensors again. The reading was gone. Whatever had been there vanished like smoke in the wind. His hearts were beating fast. In his 10 years working at this station, nothing like this had ever happened. The Veltar station floated in the empty space between human territory and the Hegemony Empire. It was one of the most important watching posts in this part of the galaxy. The station had the best sensors money could buy. They could spot a human ship from thousands of kilometers away. They were supposed to see everything, but this reading made no sense. Human ships were loud and clumsy. They used old fusion engines that burned bright like small stars. Their ships were made of thick metal and carried heavy weapons that weighed them down. Everyone knew humans were far behind the hegemony in technology. They had been flying through space for only a few hundred years, while the hegemony had been doing it for thousands. Krikstal looked around the control room. The other operators were busy watching their own sections of space. None of them seemed to notice what had happened. Maybe he was the only one who saw it. Maybe it really was just a mistake. He pressed a button to call his commander. Commander. Thainok had been in charge of this station for 20 years. He had seen everything there was to see in space. If anyone would know what to do, it would be him. Commander, Krikstal said when the communication link opened. I need to report. Something strange. What is it, Operator Krikstal? The commander's voice sounded tired. It was near the end of the shift, and everyone was ready to rest. Sir, I detected a human dreadnought at close range. Very close range. The sensors showed it was only 50 kilometers from our position. There was silence on the communication line for a long moment. Then Commander Thainok spoke again, and Krikstal could hear doubt in his voice. That is impossible, Operator. Our sensors would have detected any human ship long before it got that close. How long did you observe this contact? Only a few seconds. Sir, then it disappeared. Disappeared? Human ships do not disappear, Krikstal. They are too big and too noisy. You must have seen a sensor ghost. Sometimes our equipment sees things that are not really there. It happens when the sensors get old or when space dust gets in the way. Krikstal looked at his display again. The area where the reading had appeared was completely empty now. Maybe the commander was right. Maybe it was just his imagination or a problem with the sensors. Yes, sir. You are probably right. Should I report it in the log? No need. Just run a diagnostic on your sensor array when your shift ends. If there is a problem with the equipment, we will fix it tomorrow. The communication link closed. Krikstal sat back in his chair and tried to focus on his work. But something about the reading bothered him. It had looked so real, so solid. Not like the fuzzy, unclear images that sensor ghosts usually made. Far away from the monitoring station, in the cold darkness of space, something moved. The human dreadnought Defiant drifted through the void like a metal mountain. But no sensors could see it. No eyes could spot it against the stars. Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of her ship and watched the main display. The Veltar station appeared as a small dot of light in the distance. Her ship had just passed very close to it. Close enough to count the windows on its outer hull. But the aliens inside had no idea they were there. Captain, said her science. Officer, Lieutenant Park. The quantum fold drive is working perfectly. We maintain stealth throughout the entire approach. Captain Chun nodded. The quantum fold drive was humanity's greatest secret. It bent space and time around the ship, making it invisible to almost any kind of sensor. The technology came from an old alien probe that human scientists had found floating dead in space, near Neptune. It had taken them 15 years to understand how it worked, and another 5 years to build one that could hide something as big as a dreadnought. "Any signs that they detected us?" she asked. "There was a brief fluctuation in the stealth field when we passed closest to their station. It lasted only 3 seconds. If they saw anything, it would have looked like a sensor error." Captain Chun smiled. That was exactly what they wanted. The aliens would see impossible readings and decide their equipment was broken. They would never believe that a human ship could get so close without being detected. "Good work, Lieutenant. Set course for the next monitoring station. We have 6 more to map before we return to base." The Defiant turned away from the Veltar station and disappeared into the darkness between the stars. Behind them, Crystal finished his shift and went to his quarters, still thinking about the strange reading he had seen. He decided not to mention it to anyone else. After all, the commander had said it was impossible, but deep in his mind, a small doubt remained. What if it had been real? What if the humans were not as primitive as everyone believed? What if they had learned to do things that even the hegemony thought were impossible? These questions would keep him awake for many nights to come. 3 days passed since the strange reading at the Veltar station. Crystal had almost forgotten about it when the reports started coming in. Other monitoring stations were having the same problem: impossible sensor readings. Human ships appearing where they should not be. At the Morthic station near the gas giant Zarian, Operator Vostai saw a massive human warship for 12 seconds before it vanished. At the remote outpost guarding the Kelthera system, 2 different operators detected the same contact within an hour of each other. Each time, the readings showed human dreadnoughts at impossibly close range. The reports reached Hegemony Command on the capital world of Theron Prime. In the massive war room deep beneath the planet's surface, Admiral Zethmora read through the files with growing worry. She had fought in 3 wars and commanded fleets across half the galaxy. She knew the difference between real threats and false alarms, but these reports made no sense. Human ships were big and clumsy. They moved slowly through space with their primitive fusion engines. The hegemony could track them from the moment they left their home systems. Humans had never shown any ability to hide their ships or move without being seen. Admiral Zethmara called a meeting with her best scientists and engineers. Dr. Nimtal from the Technology Division arrived first. He was the hegemony's leading expert on human military equipment. Behind him came Engineer Prime Dexero, who designed the sensors used on all their monitoring stations. "Gentlemen," Admiral Zethmara began, "I need you to explain these sensor readings to me. 7 different stations have reported detecting human dreadnoughts at close range. Each time, the contacts disappeared within seconds." Dr. Nin Tao looked at the reports and shook his head. "Admiral, this is clearly equipment failure. Human technology is at least 200 years behind ours. Their biggest ships are slow metal boxes filled with chemical explosives and fusion reactors. They have no stealth technology at all." "But 7 different stations?" the Admiral asked. "All with the same type of malfunction?" Engineer Prime Dexero studied the data on his portable screen. "It could be solar interference, Admiral. Sometimes, radiation from nearby stars can create false readings. Or perhaps space dust clouds are reflecting our sensor beams in unusual ways." Admiral Zethmara was not satisfied with these answers. She had survived so many battles by never ignoring her instincts. Something about this situation felt wrong. "Dr. Nimtal, remind me what we know about human military capabilities." "Of course, Admiral. Humans have been flying in space for only 400 years. They still use fusion drives for most of their ships. Their weapons are simple kinetic projectiles and nuclear warheads. very crude compared to our plasma cannons and quantum disruptors. They build their ships thick and heavy because they cannot create proper force fields for protection. And their stealth capabilities, almost none, Admiral. They have some basic sensor dampening on their scout ships, but nothing that could hide a large vessel. A human dreadnought produces so much heat and electromagnetic radiation that our sensors can detect it from 10,000 kilometers away. But even as Dr. Nimtal spoke these words, another report arrived. The monitoring station at Velkov had just detected a human warship signature only 30 kilometers from their position. The contact lasted 8 seconds before disappearing. Completely far from the meeting room on Theron Prime, Captain Sarah Chun stood in the navigation center of the Defiant. Around her, the crew worked quietly at their stations. The quantum fold drive hummed softly in the lower decks, bending space and time to keep their massive ship hidden from alien eyes. Navigation, what is our next target? She asked. Lieutenant. Commander Rodriguez checked his charts. The Kefri system, Captain. Intelligence wants us to map their defensive positions around the shipyards there. Captain Chun nodded. The mission was going perfectly. For 3 days, they had moved through hegemony space like a ghost. They had photographed military bases, counted warships, and recorded defensive positions. All the information would be very useful when the peace talks began next month. The humans wanted to negotiate from a position of strength. They needed to show the hegemony that they were not weak or helpless. The best way to do that was to prove they could go anywhere and see anything, even in the heart of alien territory. Chief Engineer Martinez, Captain Chun called to another. Officer, how is our stealth system performing? Excellent, Captain. The quantum fold drive is working better than we hoped. We have had only minor fluctuations, and each one lasted less than 10 seconds. Even if their sensors detect us during those moments, the readings are so brief that they probably think their equipment is broken. Captain Chun smiled. That was exactly what the mission planners had hoped for. The hegemony was so confident in their technological superiority that they would never believe humans could develop advanced stealth technology. They would see impossible sensor readings and blame their own equipment. The quantum fold drive was humanity's greatest secret. 20 years ago, a mining ship had found a dead alien probe drifting near Neptune. The probe was old and damaged, but human scientists had spent years studying its technology. They learned how to bend space itself, creating pockets of twisted reality that sensors could not penetrate. Building the first quantum fold drive had taken another 15 years and cost more money than 3 colonies. But now humanity had something the hegemony did not expect. They had invisibility. Back on Theron Prime, Admiral Zethmara dismissed her scientists and engineers. Their explanations did not satisfy her, but she had no better answers. She decided to increase security around important military installations. If human ships were somehow operating in hegemony space, she would be ready for them, but she kept her orders quiet. The High Council would laugh at her if she told them she was worried about invisible human ships. Dr. Nimtal and Engineer Prime. Dexero had made it clear that such technology was impossible for humans to develop. Still, Admiral Zethmara had not survived 4 decades of military service by ignoring her instincts. She sent coded messages to all fleet commanders, telling them to watch for unusual sensor readings. She ordered extra patrols around key systems. She even moved 2 battle fleets to positions where they could respond quickly to any threats. Admiral did not know it, but her instincts were exactly right. Somewhere in the darkness between the stars, the Defiant continued its secret mission. Captain Chun and her crew moved closer to the most heavily defended systems in the hegemony. They mapped defensive positions and counted warships. They photographed secret bases and recorded patrol patterns. And with each successful reconnaissance, they proved that the impossible was actually very possible indeed. Junior analyst Vexani stared at the screen in her small office deep inside Hegemony Intelligence headquarters. She was the newest member of the intelligence team, fresh from the academy with new ideas and fresh eyes. While her senior colleagues dismissed the sensor reports as equipment failures, something about the pattern bothered her. She had spent the last 2 days collecting every report of strange sensor readings from the past week. 15 different monitoring stations had detected impossible contacts. Each one showed a human warship appearing at close range before vanishing. But when Vexani plotted the locations on a star map, she saw something that made her hearts race. The contacts were not random. They formed a clear pattern across space. Each detection happened near an important military installation. The Veltar station guarded the main shipping route to Sector 7. The Morthic station watched over the largest fuel depot in the outer systems. The Kefri system protected the main shipyards where new warships were built. Vexani had studied human military tactics at the academy. She knew how humans planned their operations. They always gathered intelligence before making any big moves. They sent scouts to map enemy positions and count ships. They studied defensive patterns and looked for weak spots. These sensor readings looked exactly like a reconnaissance mission. She printed out her analysis and walked to the office of Senior Analyst Mordith. He was old and experienced, with over 30 years in intelligence work. Everyone respected his knowledge and judgment. If she could convince him, maybe others would listen too. Senior Analyst Mordith, she said as she knocked on his door. I have something important to show you. Mordith looked up from his own work. He seemed annoyed at being interrupted. What is it, Junior Analyst? I am very busy preparing reports for the High Council. Vexani spread her star maps across his desk. The locations of the sensor contacts were marked with red dots. Lines connected them in a clear pattern that covered the most important systems in hegemony space. Sir, I have been studying the strange sensor readings from our monitoring stations. I believe they are not equipment failures. I think they show a human ship conducting reconnaissance operations in our territory. Mordith looked at the maps for a few seconds, then laughed. Junior Analyst, you have been reading too many adventure stories. Human ships cannot travel through our space without being detected. Their technology is primitive compared to ours. But, sir, look at the pattern. Each contact occurred near a strategic target. This is exactly how humans conduct intelligence-gathering operations. Vexani, you are new here, so I will explain something to you. Humans still use chemical rockets for some of their smaller ships. They build their warships out of thick metal plates because they cannot make proper energy shields. Their biggest weapon is a giant cannon that shoots metal slugs. Do you really think people with such crude technology could develop stealth systems that fool our sensors? Vexani felt frustrated but tried to stay calm. Senior Analyst, what if they found a way to improve their technology? What if they developed something new? Impossible. We have been watching human development for decades. They advance very slowly. It would take them at least 50 years to develop anything close to our stealth capabilities, and even then it would not work as well as ours. Mordith handed the maps back to Vexani. I suggest you focus on more realistic threats. The Zentari pirates in Sector 9 are a real problem. These sensor ghosts are just equipment getting old. Now I have real work to do. Vexani left the office feeling disappointed, but not defeated. She had been sure that Mordith would see the pattern when she showed it to him. But he was like all the senior analysts. They thought they knew everything about human capabilities. They could not imagine that humans might surprise them. Back in her office, Vexani decided to continue her investigation in secret. She requested access to older files about human technology development. She studied reports from spies who worked in human space. She read everything she could find about human scientific research. What she discovered made her even more certain that something big was happening. Human scientists had been very interested in something called space-time manipulation for the past 20 years. They had built several research stations far from their main colonies. These stations were heavily guarded and very secret. Humans had also been searching for old alien artifacts in their solar system. They had found several pieces of ancient technology and spent years studying them. Some reports suggested they had learned to copy and improve on these alien devices. Meanwhile, the sensor reports kept coming in. Every day brought new contacts from different monitoring stations. The pattern was getting bigger and more obvious. Whoever was conducting this reconnaissance mission was being very thorough. They were mapping every important system in the border regions. Aboard the Defiant, Captain Sarah Chun reviewed the latest intelligence data with her senior officers. They had now visited 18 different systems and mapped the defenses around dozens of military installations. The mission was going better than anyone had hoped. "Captain," said Chief Engineer Martinez, "the quantum fold drive is performing excellently. We have had only minor fluctuations, and each one is getting shorter as the crew learns to operate the system better. Any signs that the hegemony suspects what we are doing?" Captain Chun asked. Intelligence Officer Lieutenant Park checked his reports. "No, Captain. Our contacts inside hegemony space report that their military leaders are treating the sensor readings as equipment failures. They have not increased patrols or changed their defensive positions." Captain Chun nodded with satisfaction. The hegemony's arrogance was working in humanity's favor. They were so sure of their technological superiority that they could not imagine humans developing advanced stealth technology. This blind spot would be very useful during the peace negotiations. "What is our next target?" she asked. "The Meridian System, Captain. It contains their largest military academy and their main research center for new weapons. Intelligence wants detailed scans of both facilities." "Excellent. The more we know about their capabilities, the better we can negotiate. Set course for Meridian." The Defiant turned toward its next target, moving through space like a shadow among the stars. Behind them, monitoring stations detected brief, impossible contacts and reported them as sensor malfunctions. The pattern grew larger and more complete with each passing day. Back on Theron Prime, Vexani worked late into the night, adding new data points to her maps. She was now completely certain that a human ship was operating in hegemony space. The evidence was overwhelming to anyone willing to look at it with an open mind, but she was just a junior analyst, and no one wanted to listen to impossible theories from someone so new and inexperienced. The senior staff had made up their minds about human capabilities, and nothing would change their thinking. Still, Vexani continued her secret investigation. She knew that someday the truth would come out, and when it did, she wanted to be ready. With all the evidence, the humans were proving that the impossible was actually very possible indeed. 2 weeks had passed since the first strange sensor reading, and the reports were now coming in every day. Admiral Zefmura sat in her private office reading the latest files. 37 monitoring stations had detected impossible contacts. The pattern was becoming too big and too regular to ignore. The peace summit between humanity and the hegemony was only 1 week away. Representatives from both sides would meet on the neutral moon of Corvath to discuss trade agreements and territorial boundaries. Admiral Zefmura was responsible for security at the summit. She could not allow any surprises or threats to disrupt the negotiations. Despite what her scientists and engineers told her, the Admiral's instincts screamed that something was very wrong. She had survived 4 wars by trusting those instincts. She decided to quietly reinforce security around the summit location without telling anyone the real reason why. She sent coded orders to Fleet Commander Yex Thal. 3 battle groups would move to positions near Corvath. Officially, they were conducting training exercises. Unofficially, they would be ready to respond to any threats. She also ordered increased patrols around the most important military installations in the region. Meanwhile, junior analyst Vexani made a discovery that changed everything. She had been working late in the intelligence archives, searching through old research files that most people had forgotten. Deep in the classified section, she found something that made her blood run cold. 25 years ago, hegemony scientists had worked on a secret project called Quantum Fold Stealth. The goal was to bend space and time around a ship, making it completely invisible to all types of sensors. The mathematics were perfect, and the theory was sound. But when they tried to build a working prototype, they failed. The energy requirements were too high. The space-time distortions were too unstable. The equipment needed was too large and complex. After 5 years of failed experiments, the project was canceled. The scientists declared that quantum fold stealth was theoretically possible, but practically impossible to achieve. Vexani compared the quantum signatures from the failed experiments with the sensor readings from the monitoring stations. They matched perfectly. The brief contacts that everyone thought were equipment failures showed exactly the same energy patterns as the abandoned hegemony prototype. Someone had succeeded where the hegemony had failed. Someone had built a working quantum fold stealth system. And based on the reconnaissance pattern, that someone was human. Vex single quotes. ANI printed out all her evidence and ran to Admiral Zethmora's office. This was too important to go through normal channels. If she was right, everything the hegemony believed about human technology was wrong. "Admiral," she said as she burst into the office without permission, "I have urgent information about the sensor readings." Admiral Zethmora looked up in surprise. She recognized Vexani as one of the junior analysts, but they had never met personally. "Junior analyst, you should go through proper channels. I cannot meet with low-level staff without appointments. Admiral, please, this cannot wait. I have discovered what is causing the sensor readings. It is not equipment failure. It is a human ship using quantum fold stealth technology." The Admiral's expression changed from annoyance to interest. "Quantum fold stealth? That is impossible. Our own scientists proved it could not be built." Vexani spread her files across the Admiral's desk. "Admiral, the quantum signatures from our failed experiments match the sensor readings exactly. Someone has succeeded in building what we could not. And based on the reconnaissance pattern, it has to be humans." Admiral Zethmora studied the evidence carefully. The mathematical analysis was detailed and accurate. The pattern of contacts clearly showed systematic intelligence gathering. The quantum signatures were indeed identical to the abandoned hegemony project. "If this is true," the Admiral said slowly, "then we have seriously underestimated human capabilities. A ship with working quantum fold stealth could go anywhere and see anything. It could map all our defenses and count all our ships without us knowing." Far from Theron Prime, Captain Sarah Chun received her most dangerous mission yet. The Defiant had been ordered to observe the Peace Summit preparations on Korvath. This meant getting very close to the most heavily defended location in hegemony space. "Engineering," she called to Chief Martinez. "What is the status of our stealth system?" "Captain, we are pushing the quantum fold drive harder than ever before. We have been using it continuously for 2 weeks. The equipment is showing signs of strain. Some of the space-time manipulation coils are overheating. How much longer can we operate at full stealth?" "Maybe another week, Captain. After that, we will need to return to base for maintenance. The drive was not designed for such extended use." Captain Chun nodded. 1 more week would be enough to complete their mission. They would observe the summit preparations, count the defensive ships, and map the security arrangements. Then they would return home with intelligence that would give humanity a huge advantage in the negotiations. Navigation: set course for the Korvath system. take us in slowly and carefully. I want detailed scans of everything in that system." The Defiant moved toward its most dangerous target yet. The Korvath system was protected by 3 battle fleets and dozens of monitoring stations. If the quantum fold drive failed at the wrong moment, they would be surrounded by enemies with no chance of escape. As they approached Korvath, the stealth system began to show more problems. The space-time distortions fluctuated more frequently. The energy requirements kept increasing. Chief Martinez watched his instruments with growing worry. "Captain," he reported, "the quantum fold drive is becoming unstable. The field fluctuations are lasting longer each time." "How long are the fluctuations now?" "The last one lasted almost 30 seconds, Captain. If that happens while we are close to their monitoring stations, they will definitely detect us." "Captain." Shun made a difficult decision. The mission was too important to abandon, but the risks were growing every minute. "Continue the approach, Chief. Monitor the drive carefully and warn me if the fluctuations get any worse." The Defiant moved deeper into the Korvath system, mapping defensive positions and counting warships. The quantum fold drive hummed and sparked, bending space and time around the massive ship. But the technology was reaching its limits. Then it happened. As the Defiant passed within 50 kilometers of the main monitoring station orbiting Korvath, the quantum fold drive experienced its worst fluctuation yet. For nearly a full minute, the stealth field collapsed completely. Every sensor in the Phiocolon system detected the massive human Dreadnought at the same time. Alarms rang across dozens of monitoring stations. The readings were so clear and detailed that no one could dismiss them as equipment failure, but the contact was so impossible, so completely against everything the hegemony believed about human technology, that the automated systems flagged it as a massive collective malfunction. The computers decided that so many sensors could not all detect the same impossible thing at the same time. It had to be a system-wide error. By the time human operators could review the readings, the Defiant had disappeared again. The quantum fold drive stabilized and the ship faded back into invisibility. But for one terrifying minute, humanity's greatest secret had been exposed for all to see. On Theron Prime, Admiral Zefmura received the preliminary reports from Korvath within hours. A human Dreadnought had been detected by multiple sensors simultaneously. The readings were detailed enough to identify the ship's class, size, and armament. There was no doubt that it was real. The Admiral now had proof that Vexani was right. The impossible had become possible. Humans had developed technology that the hegemony had abandoned as too difficult to build. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted, and almost no one realized it yet. The Peace Summit began on the neutral moon of Korvath exactly 1 week after the massive sensor detection. Ambassador Martinez sat across the polished table from the hegemony delegation in the Grand Meeting Hall. The humans had come to negotiate trade routes and territorial boundaries. The hegemony believed they held all the advantages. High Counselor Zefran led the alien delegation. He was old and proud, with the confident manner of someone who had never lost a negotiation. Behind him sat 3 advisors and 2 military officers. They all shared the same expression of barely hidden superiority. Ambassador Martinez, High Counselor Zefran began. "We are pleased that humanity has finally agreed to discuss realistic terms for coexistence. Your people have shown remarkable progress for such a young species, but you must understand your limitations." Ambassador Martinez smiled politely. "High Counselor, we appreciate the opportunity for dialogue. However, I think you may be surprised by what humanity can offer to this partnership." "Come now, Ambassador, let us speak honestly. Humanity controls 12 star systems. The hegemony controls over 300. Your largest warships are crude metal boxes powered by fusion reactors. Ours are elegant vessels that bend energy and matter to our will. Surely you can see that any agreement must reflect these realities." The other hegemony delegates nodded in agreement. They had studied human military capabilities for decades. Everything they knew told them that humans were centuries behind in technology and utterly dependent on hegemony goodwill for survival. But while the diplomats talked, Admiral Zethmora was having the most important meeting of her military career. She sat in the secured conference room beneath the summit building with Vexani and 3 members of the High Council. Between them lay a mountain of evidence that would change everything. Honorable counselors, Admiral Zethmora began. What I am about to show you will challenge everything we believe about human capabilities. Junior analyst Vexani has discovered that humans have successfully developed quantum-fold stealth technology. Counselor Drakmer, the oldest member of the High Council, laughed dismissively. Admiral, that is impossible. Our greatest scientists worked for years on quantum-fold stealth and proved it could not be built. Humans are far behind us in every field of science. Vexani spread out her analysis on the table. Honored counselors, the evidence is overwhelming. The sensor readings from our monitoring stations show quantum signatures identical to our failed stealth experiments. A human ship has been conducting systematic reconnaissance throughout our territory for 3 weeks. Show them the Korvath data, Admiral Zethmora said quietly. Vexani activated a holographic display that showed the detailed sensor readings from the Korvath system. For 63 seconds, multiple monitoring stations had tracked a human Dreadnought as it moved through the most secure system in hegemony space. The readings were so clear that they could identify the ship's exact dimensions and armament. The 3 counselors stared at the display in shocked silence. The data was undeniable. A human warship had penetrated their defenses and observed their most secret installations without being detected for weeks. How is this possible? Counselor Yethel whispered. Our intelligence reports say humans still use chemical rockets for some of their ships. Honorable counselors, Vexani said. I believe humans found some of our old technology and improved upon it. 20 years ago, we sent exploration probes throughout this region of space. Some of those probes were lost or abandoned. If humans found one and studied it, they might have learned the principles of quantum fold manipulation. Admiral Zethmora nodded grimly. This means humans can go anywhere in our space without being seen. They can map our defenses, count our ships, and observe our most secret facilities. The strategic implications are enormous. Above them in the summit hall, the negotiations continued. High Counselor Zefran was explaining why humanity should be grateful for any territorial concessions the hegemony might offer. Your people must understand that technology determines power in the modern galaxy, he said condescendingly. Until humans develop proper starships and effective weapons, you will always be dependent on more advanced species for protection and guidance. Ambassador Martinez listened patiently, but there was a strange smile on her face. High Counselor, I think you may be operating under some outdated assumptions about human technology. Outdated? Ambassador, our intelligence services monitor human development very carefully. We know exactly what your people can and cannot do. Do you really? Tell me, High Counselor, how confident are you in your monitoring systems? Before the hegemony leader could answer, Admiral Zethmora entered the hall through a side door. Her face was pale, and she carried a data tablet that seemed to weigh as much as a mountain. Behind her walked Vexani and the 3 High Counselors. High Counselor Zefran, Admiral Zethmora said formally, I must interrupt these proceedings with urgent military intelligence. The hegemony delegation turned to look at her with confusion and annoyance. Admiral, this is a diplomatic meeting. Military matters can wait until we finish. I am afraid they cannot wait, High Counselor. We have discovered that a human warship has been operating undetected in our territory for 3 weeks. It has conducted reconnaissance missions at 37 different military installations. The room fell completely silent. High Counselor Zefran stared at the Admiral as if she had spoken in a foreign language. That is impossible, Admiral. Human ships cannot penetrate our sensor networks. Admiral Zethmara activated her data tablet, projecting the holographic evidence into the center of the room. The detailed analysis showed tracking data, quantum signatures, and reconnaissance patterns that covered half of hegemony space. The evidence is conclusive, High Counselor. Humans have developed quantum-fold stealth technology that makes their ships completely invisible to our sensors. They have succeeded where our own scientists failed. Ambassador Martinez stood up slowly, her smile growing wider. High Counselor, I believe this changes the nature of our negotiations somewhat. Perhaps we should discuss terms between equals rather than between superior and inferior partners. High Counselor Zephyrin looked from the holographic display to Ambassador Martinez and back again. His confident expression crumbled as the implications became clear. If humans could hide their ships from hegemony sensors, then every assumption about the balance of power was wrong. How? He whispered. How did you develop such technology? My people have a saying, High Counselor. We prefer to speak softly while carrying a big stick. The problem is that no one noticed the stick because they could not see it. At that moment, space around Korvath shimmered like heat waves rising from hot pavement. The quantum fold field that had hidden the Defiant for weeks finally collapsed completely. Chief Engineer Martinez had pushed the stealth system far beyond its limits, and it could not function any longer. Every sensor in the system immediately detected the massive human Dreadnought, as it appeared less than 1,000 kilometers from the moon's surface. The ship was enormous, heavily armed, and completely real. It had been watching the Peace Summit from the beginning. In the summit hall, Admiral Zethmara's tablet chimed with incoming reports. She read them quickly, then looked up at the assembled delegates. High Counselor, the human ship has just a cloak voluntarily. It is currently in orbit around this moon. High Counselor Zephyrin sank back into his chair, his face showing a mixture of shock, fear, and grudging respect. The humans had not only developed impossible technology, but they had used it to completely rewrite the rules of galactic politics. Ambassador Martinez sat down across from him again, but now she held all the advantages. High Counselor, shall we begin the real negotiations? I think you will find that humanity has much more to offer than you previously believed. Outside the moon's atmosphere, the Defiant hung in space like a metal mountain crowned with weapon emplacements. Captain Sarah Chun stood on her bridge and watched the diplomatic facility below. Her mission was complete. Humanity had proven that the impossible was not only possible, but that humans could achieve it when everyone else had given up trying. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted in a single moment, and no one would underestimate humanity again.